Hello friends, welcome back to ESPN's Football Forecast. My name is James Allcott, that's Kweku, Afari, and that is Pippa, Monique. And we are about to talk about all things Premier League, and we're going to kick off with a belter of a game, the North London Derby. Pippa, first of all, I mean, you could have come into this game not on the back of a 5-0 demolition of Chelsea, but you have.
Yeah.
How heavily does that affect the mood going into this game? Because sometimes derbies can kind of be in a bit of a bubble. Does this feel like that, or are you taking a lot from that game? And Kweku will ask you about that game in a second as well. It's a Chelsea fan.
I mean, there are worse ways to go into a North London derby, but I feel like every time you look at the fixture list, that's an isolated game in itself for Arsenal fans, I think. So obviously having a big win beforehand is such a positive outlook to go into that game, especially in an away fixture. And we've been excellent away from home this season. But I don't know, like, why are you laughing?
No, because
I spoke too soon.
because it was also positive, but I don't know, and then a long pause, which I get, I understand it.
The only reason, you just never know what to expect from a derby. Like the one earlier this season at home, I genuinely, even though it was tighter margins then, obviously Tottenham with their new signings, James Maddison coming into the mix, I was more confident then that we'd get the win. Because it was at home, we had an amazing atmosphere at home this season. So you just never know what to expect. We ended up drawing. So it's a difficult one. And we've had 3 games in the last, 10, 12 days. So it's quick backlog.
And I guess the paranoia that's weird about derbies is that Spurs lost their last game 4-0.
Yeah, I even forgot
and that actually, that can make you feel worse. Because if they're you're going to go, oh, is there a response? Or like, oh, well, then the onus is on us to absolutely like wipe the floor with them because they've lost that last game 4-0. And they're obviously not that bad. When it comes to the Chelsea side of it, when we're reflecting on Arsenal's performance and what they can take, in their win against Chelsea, Arsenal totaled a 3.42 XG. Obviously got the 5 goals, registered 27 shots, created 4 big chances. But Chelsea created 3 big chances themselves. So how much of it was Arsenal were great and how much of it was Chelsea were poor or soft or what would you say?
I'm attributing it probably 60% of it being Arsenal being great and 40% of it being Chelsea being absolutely dismal. It's the second worst defeat in Chelsea's history in terms of Premier League results. But you've got to credit Arsenal, and you saw it from the beginning. The midfield was non-existent for Chelsea, but on the other hand, Arsenal's midfield was so strong. And for the first time this season, really, we got to see Partey, Odegaard and Rice, and it worked. And so it's given Arsenal options between now and the end of the season. Partey now seems like he's back to full fitness. And I think that's where Arsenal have an advantage. We've all waxed lyrical about Arsenal's right-hand side, whether it's Ben White, through to Martin Odegaard, who plays on the right-hand side of that midfield, through to Bukayo Saka, who didn't get on the score sheet, but was great against Chelsea. I know he's had his naysayers this season. But Arsenal was just really strong. And if you look at those 3 contending sides for the title, they're playing the best. But like you said, derbies are in an isolation. They're in their own bubble. And the game earlier in the season, Arsenal probably would have expected to win that one, like you said. They drew. They could have actually lost that game.
Yeah.
That was one of the few games that Arsenal have been outplayed this season. But Arsenal have been great in big games this year. Whether it's home and away against Man City, got a draw in one of them and win one of them. Home and away against Liverpool as well, 4 points out of those 6. Arsenal have been great in big games against their biggest rivals this season. So I expect them to show up against Spurs, but the rest for Spurs is huge. And it's the message that Ange can put across to his side. It's been almost 2 weeks since they played football.
So, and do you think that's a positive? Because if I said to you, look, you can have 12 days off.
Yeah.
That kind of sounds great, but you can maybe lose a bit of rhythm there.
Exactly.
But Arsenal played, 3 games in a week, which is too much as well. Are you happier being Arsenal, or are you happy being?
It's a double-sided coin, because it's obviously like I said. Well, I said off air, when you have quick games succession like Arsenal did with the Champions League game, then come back to play 2 Premier League games, it's like they don't actually have time to mentally get over that big loss they had away in Europe to then come back and try and salvage points in the Premier League. And sometimes you think a break will be necessary, but then you might not be up to your best after 12 days. I mean, I don't want to speak too soon. Like, I'd think if you'll be off rhythm. You haven't played for such a long time. You're just sat at home watching games, whatever they're doing. I'm sure they're having training sessions, of course, and keeping up their fitness, but it's not the same. You need to be compete at a competitive level.
And I think the response
all the
was
time.
good. I think that's important here, because I think the Bayern Munich game happened, and off the back of the Aston Villa game, and everyone's doom and gloom. 1 week later, you've won 2 games. You've won your last 2. Like, that feels so different. You've scored 7 goals, you conceded none in that time. So that's a big part here as well. And I think when it comes to the game itself, what I can't kind of compute, which is the great thing about football, is that like it's going to be loud, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be an amazing atmosphere. But I think Arsenal generally start games really well. And I think 12 days off, I mean, you can't win, can you? You know, rested or you're not rested.
You just never know. Like...
I wonder if Arsenal come out in that first 15 minutes and Tottenham can't handle that, or the crowd is kind of not too much, but like powers on Tottenham to start quickly. Yeah. I'm really fascinated to see how that first 15 minutes go. In the games that they've had this year, those big ones that you talk about where they've done really well, Arsenal have been really good at kind of stifling the opposition, but you've still got to be able to go out there and create. And this could be one when, especially in that first game, it was hectic, wasn't it? And there were those little moments, not of chaos, but of freedom and creativity. And that came from two players. And one in particular I thought shone on that day was Maddison. Yeah. But he has gone a little bit quiet. I want to talk about Odegaard in a second. But first of all, James Maddison, do you feel like he's struggling a bit? At the moment,
lost a bit of a spark. He was flying up until the game where Spurs lost against Chelsea and they seemed to lose half their team. He went down with an injury as a long-term injury, and he hasn't really been able to capture his best form since. And you've seen Spurs be inconsistent as a result of Maddison coming out of the team. Before that, they were in the title race.
Yeah.
If
well,
you ask
that
Spurs
was a bit earlier. When I was super early for them to say
it was
that.
early, but they were top of the league.
Yeah.
And Maddison went down with the injury, and Spurs have been inconsistent ever since. And you've seen it now. He's just trying to find his feet. I won't worry about James Maddison. He's a quality player who's done it for a long time, and he will eventually find his footing again. But Spurs needs him to be at his best against Arsenal, because with derbies, a lot of it's about moments, and James Maddison can give you moments from isolated pieces of play, whether it's a free kick or a corner or a set piece. And he could always give you that, even if he's not playing well. And on your point in terms of Arsenal coming out quickly, I do expect Arsenal to come out fast, because they always come out fast. But with derbies being about moments, whether Spurs can handle that initial storm and then settle into it and let the crowd get into it as well. If Spurs go 1-0 down early, the crowd are going to get nervy, and Arsenal probably see the game out. But if Spurs can just weather that early storm, I expect it to be a really, really good game, and pretty similar to the game that we saw earlier this season.
And the other side of that, actually, I think, is one problem I think with Tottenham is that they're quite one-paced. It's just like go. And like anything, I think if there's Foden was talking about how Pep Guardiola had said to him in terms of his development, you got to sort of learn how to slow the game down sometimes to then sort of stop people and get things moving and making it difficult for the opposition. Feels like Tottenham are just so gung-ho that people can kind of see it coming, you know, in its simplest form. If an opposition's playing the ball over the top all the time, after the third time, you're already on your bike and you can kind of see those things happening. So again, coming back to that 15 minutes, which I think will be crucial, that pace of a start, or the gung-ho nature of Spurs, can Arsenal deal with that without the ball? And one person who I think is amazing for Arsenal without the ball, a bit of a leader when it comes to the press and the defensive setup, is Martin Odegaard. But after those 15 minutes, he's the guy, Pippa, that you're going to want to go and create and go and win the game for them. The game against Bayern, 50 touches, one key pass, just didn't have a great game in that one, and therefore the team seemed to struggle. But in the Chelsea game, he was amazing. He was amazing, wasn't he? Yeah.
I mean, one thing about Martin, it's like he doesn't get tired. He will press the full 90 minutes. He's keeping the team up, keeping the tempo up. I feel like you said earlier with the Chelsea game, with Partey coming back in that midfield alongside Martin and Rice, it gives Arsenal that upper hand because when we think about this battle between Arsenal and Spurs, like you said, Maddison is the main character that we're looking out for, and that's the one we want to isolate and make sure we limit his chances to create opportunities for Spurs, because the only difference between the Spurs game and the Chelsea game is that Chelsea did create a couple of chances. Like I think you said it was 3 main chances.
Yep.
Spurs will create more than that, especially with Maddison in the midfield. If Partey can, at home as well. So with that midfield 3 that I'm assuming that Mikel Arteta will go with, we can lock that off, hopefully, lock Maddison off, and then, like you said, come out early, get that. If we get that early goal, look, Saka hasn't even been up to his best standard the last 7-8 games, I think it is, and he's still performing okay. It's not like he's off the mark completely, it's just not at his best. I feel like this will be the game that Saka's always up for, and we can expect to see him on a score sheet again as well. But Martin Odegaard, outstanding. Him in that midfield is just... It's just like a duck to water. It's just like, it's gravy. It's perfect.
He's so good at football. Yeah. Like, that's literally it. He's just so good at playing football, and he's a joy to watch. And despite the fact that Chelsea were demolished in that game, I've said it so many times, he's my favourite non-Chelsea player to watch, because you can put him in any era. Because he's sneaky physical as well. He's got that physicality, can get around the pitch. And I feel like that midfield battle is where it's going to be won. If you look at Spurs, I feel like they're better, especially when you're talking about that pause, like the pace into which they play. They can only go one way this season. I feel in the summer, maybe go and try and find a deep line playmaker who can set that tempo. But they're better when they've got Pape Sarr and they've got Bissouma. And in recent weeks, they've gone with Bentancur in that midfield against Newcastle, and they struggled. They got overrun, and I don't think he necessarily gives you that, despite the fact that last season he was really strong. I think Arsenal's midfield, they go with that Rice, Odegaard and Partey. That's where they can win the game because they can just overpower them and they can all play football as well. And so it'll be really, really interesting to see what Ange goes with, whether he goes with Sarr and he goes with Bissouma, or he goes with Bentancur and he goes with Bissouma, because I feel like that's where the game could be won. And like I say, you've got a player like Martin Odegaard who can find those pockets and be a bit more nuanced than the other midfielders there. That's where the real advantage lies for Arsenal.
It's so funny to me that we're having this conversation now at this time of the season about Odegaard and Maddison, because I remember it like it was yesterday, the very beginning of the season, there was this huge comparison, like who's going to have a better season, Odegaard or Maddison. And I did some content with some Spurs fans and they obviously said Maddison, but a lot of the Spurs fans did factor in the fact that if Maddison has a fully fit season, he'll be the better player. And it's like they already knew that there'll be a moment in the season that he won't be able to complete the full season. But taking that aside, injury aside, I still, for me, maybe I'm biased, I just feel like Odegaard's the one out of them two.
Yeah, I come back to sort of off the ball as well. Like I think when I picture this game and the goals that are going to be scored, I think like Tottenham, if you could stop Tottenham, but also if you can stop them kind of working their way through the pitch, they'll give you a chance in terms of getting the ball. So in transition, first of all, you can catch them out. You've got a great opportunity to go and score. Secondly, I think Arsenal are great at that with that midfield that you're talking about. So in terms of predictions, I actually think Arsenal might do this one. I think they're in a good place, and I think although there'll be more spaces for Spurs to hurt Arsenal, I think Arsenal will control that first 15 minutes, and I think from there quieten down the crowd. And yeah, I think it'll be a steely one for them, but maybe like a 2-0 victory for Arsenal. What do you think, Craig?
I'll take that.
Arsenal this season against the traditionally big sides haven't lost a game apart from that Bayern Munich second leg. I'm not going to root against Arsenal. I'm not going to pick against Arsenal this one. I'm going 2-1 Arsenal win.
I like these predictions. I feel like for once I'm going to go and be confident and go into this North London derby. Like you said, the one loss in 2024, and the three most consistent players for me this season has been our centre-back pairing, Saliba and Gabriel, and then Ben White next to them. And I feel like that will help us keep a clean sheet. So I'm going to go 2-0 Arsenal.